Battle Through the Heavens, Grand World. Chapter 76. Zhou Yuan. The streets of West Star City were connected in all directions, and the streets were packed with people. On both sides of the streets, various shops were lined up neatly, and they were selling a dazzling variety of goods. Tisk tisk, it's really bustling. Walking on the street and looking at the bustling scene around him, Xiaoyan couldn't help but exclaim in his heart. The liveliness in the city was like the difference between heaven and earth and the silence in the forest outside. Let's stay here for a day and prepare some things that we need during the cultivation process before setting off. After making up his mind, Xiaoyan's tense mind in the forest had finally relaxed. Seeing the restaurant not far away, Xiaoyan walked over without hesitation. Since he had decided to stay for a day, he would satisfy his desire to eat first. After entering the restaurant, the waiter, who was a little unhappy when he saw Xiaoyan's tattered clothes, took out several hundred monarch crystals and immediately smiled. He attentively brought Xiaoyan to a seat near the window on the top floor, where he could see everything on the street clearly. After ordering a pot of wine and some dishes, Xiaoyan looked at the bustling crowd below. While he was drinking, a somewhat unrestrained voice was suddenly heard. "Brother, it's a bit lonely to drink alone here. Why don't you let me invite some maids to drink with you?" The person who came sat across Xiaoyan and said with a smile. Xiaoyan frowned and looked up. Opposite him was a young man dressed in blue. He had a handsome face and looked somewhat heroic. There was a trace of an unrestrained smile at the corner of his mouth, but there was a familiar look in his eyes. When Xiaoyan was in Fighting Key Continent, he could often sense that feeling in the eyes of some old monsters who had lived for countless years, such as the Pill Tower's old ancestor, Zhu Kun, Jiyu Yuan, and others. "I'm not interested. If you need it, I do have some spare money. I can let you have some fun." Xiaoyan drank the wine in his cup and smiled. The young man in front of him did not give him any disgust. Instead, he gave him an unruly feeling. Ha ha ha. When the young man heard this, he laughed in a carefree manner, totally ignoring the gazes of the surrounding guests. "No need to trouble, brother. No matter how poor I am, I will not find those maids to get drunk." The youth's strange gaze swept across Xiaoyan. After which, he also laughed lightly. He picked up Xiaoyan's wine jar and poured himself a cup. He looked out the window with a smile on his face. When Xiaoyan saw this, he didn't say anything. He poured himself a cup of wine and then started to eat his own food. "I'm Zhou Yuan. May I know your name, brother?" The young man looked at the street view outside the window for a while, then turned around and drank the wine in his cup. He looked at Xiaoyan and said with a smile, "I, Xiaoyan." Xiaoyan said lightly as he ate. The young man named Zhou Yuan nodded and stared at Xiaoyan for a while. When the latter frowned and looked up, Zhou Yuan looked away and looked out the window again. "May I know what business you have with me, brother Zhou?" Xiaoyan placed his chopsticks on the table and looked straight at Zhou Yuan. He said in a low voice, "This guy came from an unknown place. Judging from his performance just now, he didn't seem to be an enemy. Besides, he had just entered the West Star City and had never had any conflicts with anyone. Hee. With Mr. Xiao's experience as a fighting monarch, I can't believe he's still so impatient." Zhou Yuan looked directly into Xiaoyan's eyes and said in a calm tone, "Fighting monarch." Xiaoyan was startled. Then, as if he had thought of something, he gave Zhou Yuan a deep look and said, "Brother Zhou is also a fighting monarch that was upgraded in the lower realm." When Zhou Yuan heard this, he smiled and said, "Since Mr. Xiao said so, I think it must be a fighting monarch that broke through to the next realm." "What? How did you find out?" Xiaoyan had also calmed down at this moment. He looked into Zhou Yuan's eyes and said in a deep voice, "It's very simple. I can feel the sovereign aura in your body. This kind of feeling is not something that an ordinary person can imitate. The person who possesses it is either the Mount Tai and Big Dipper of the great world. They were either the fighting monarchs of the lower realms that had been constantly tempered and contained themselves." Looking at Mr. Xiao's actions, he thought for a moment. "It's the latter. Furthermore, as a top expert of the pyramid in the lower realm, I have seen many beautiful women. Who would be interested in rouge powder? Am I right, Mr. Xiao?" Brother Zhou's eyes are really sharp. "I admire you." Xiaoyan smiled noncommittally and said faintly. Zhou Yuan did not mind. He looked out the window and seemed to talk to himself. "I think Mr. Xiao has the same feeling. He has been in a high position in the lower realm for a long time. It's hard for him to accept it in such a short period of time. From the strongest to the weakest. The gap between them is like heaven and hell. After listening to Zhou Yuan's words, Xiao Yan felt slightly shocked in his heart, as if he shared the same feeling. When I first came here, I was also full of confidence. I wanted to make my own glory once again, but my strength was too weak. I had no choice but to join a sect in the star field, but I think Mr. Xiao can also experience it. Our sect in the lower realm is either the supreme elder or the ancestor of our sect. Here, we are the lowest ranked disciples. Even though I have the heart to endure, the pride of the fighting monarch has driven me to the brink of insanity. Xiao Yan raised his head at this moment and quietly listened to Zhou Yuan talking to himself. His heart showed a trace of sympathy. Although he had almost entered Elder Yi's illusion realm from the very beginning, his bitter cultivation in the forest domain had driven him crazy. After advancing to the Emperor realm, I couldn't bear it anymore. So, I took advantage of the time when I was going out for a trial and secretly escaped. After a few twists and turns, I arrived at the forest domain. Although my life in the West Star City was a little messy, I was very comfortable and didn't need to be angry with those bastards in the sect. As he spoke, Zhou Yuan also turned his head with a smile. He looked at Xiao Yan and said, I have been here for nearly 10 years. Although I don't have many friends, I still have some connections. After that, Zhou Yuan's gaze swept across the surroundings and suddenly said in a low voice. Now, I have a risky method to seek wealth. Mr. Xiao, do you dare to try it? If I succeed, I can easily obtain 1,000,000 monarch crystals. Xiao Yan's heart moved when he heard this, but he still said calmly, since Brother Zhou has already said that he has some connections in the West Star City. Why did you come looking for me for such a good thing? Zhou Yuan chuckled and said, we are all people who have experienced great storms in the lower realm. Then, I will be frank with you. One reason is because I know the benefits that Mr. Xiao needs. Since Mr. Xiao has come from the lower realm, I think the monarch crystal is the most important thing. If I succeed in this task, there will be a lot of monarch crystals. Seeing Xiao Yan nod his head, Zhou Yuan continued, this is the second point. Looking at Mr. Xiao's appearance, he must also be alone. This kind of person must have killed many people in the lower realm. He must have the courage to do so. He wouldn't be a burden. 3. What I need is not monarch crystals. I need something else. It's different from Mr. Xiao's interests. It just so happens to be a good thing. Xiao Yan smiled when he heard this, and said in a low voice, Brother Zhou's words are really straightforward. Xiao Yan is also not a vague person. Tell me, what news do you have, Brother Zhou? Zhou Yuan wasn't surprised at all when he heard that. It was as if he knew that Xiao Yan would agree. Immediately, he said in a low voice, according to what I know, the county princess of Wuling Prefecture, Deyang Prefecture, dug out many treasures and forest domains from the remains of an expert in forest domain. Those relatively precious things were brought back by the expert first. Only some precious ores and millions of monarch crystals are left. Those ores seem to be materials used to create formations. Due to their violent nature, they can't be stored in storage rings, so they can only be transported. Hence, they disguised themselves and planned to disguise as bodyguards to rush back to Deyang County. In order to not attract attention, they announced to the public that they wanted to escort a batch of storage rings made ores. Although the storage rings making ores were precious, it would not attract the attention of many powerhouses. Hence, starting from yesterday, the requirements are to be at the sovereign master level. Why is it a sovereign master? Xiao Yan was puzzled. In order to be safe, the more powerful the bodyguard was, the better. Because their strength is at the monarch spirit, and a sovereign master is the strongest combat strength they can control. Zhou Yuan explained in a low voice, what I need is the monarch arts monarch skill in the leader's storage ring. The 1,000,000 monarch crystals that Mr. Xiao needs are also among them. I know that the value of the monarch arts is far greater than the 1,000,000 monarch crystals. Therefore, the 10 spirit weapons that they obtained from the ruins will all belong to Mr. Xiao. What do you think? Monarch arts. Xiao Yan's heart trembled, but he immediately suppressed the feeling of being moved. He looked at Zhou Yuan with a fervent gaze. He said in a low voice, Brother Zhou and I are not the only bodyguards that we have recruited. Let's take all our belongings. What do you intend to use to compensate the remaining people? Compensate. Zhou Yuan smiled playfully and said softly, about that, Mr. Xiao is thinking too much. Do you think there will be no powerful people who will come to rob you along the way? When that time comes, they will all die. What kind of compensation do we need? Right, Mr. Xiao. Xiaoyan's eyes focused. He looked at Zhou Yuan, who was looking at him with burning eyes. Suddenly, he laughed lightly and said, Brother Zhou's words make sense. Chapter end. Hi guys, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.